Just about 1 hour ago, the Pakistan media wing of the Pakistan Armed Forces, they tweeted out an announcement that an Indian national Kulbhushan Jadhav has been sentenced to death by a Pakistani military court for espionage and subversive activities in Pakistan. He had been basically caught on March 6th last year, and this is this is happening basically a year later after his arrest. We have the founding editor of The Wire, Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan, with us to discuss the repercussions of the death sentence, which actually we don't know when the trial happened or when the sentence actually was given out. Can you please explain to us what would be the next step after this?
Yeah, I think it's important to just take a step back and to begin with, try to decode this announcement that's come today, right, which caught us out, really came from out of the blue. This is on the surface a press release by the ISPR division, as you say, the media wing of the Pakistani army, and it says that Kulbhushan Jadhav, who they describe as a serving naval officer, they've always insisted that he's a serving naval officer, and they say that he's an agent of RNAW, that he was subjected to a field general court-martial and as a spy and sentenced to death. They say he was tried under the Army Act and under the Official Secrets Act, which is the basic law in India or Pakistan that you would apply for a spy. They also say he was given an officer to defend him, and he was found guilty. They in fact say he confessed before a magistrate and the court, and he has been sentenced to death. Now, we don't know when when the actual court-martial was held. We don't know anything about this, because Pakistan, after the initial flurry of announcements, when he was arrested last year, and they were really quite forthcoming with information of the kind that they wanted to put out, right? You remember the video that they played, where they said that he had made a full confession, and
that was the same day as if I'm not mistaken, on March 26th.
That's right. I mean, in the sense that I think a day or so after after his arrest was announced.
That was March 26th.
That's right.
I think the Indian High Commissioner was summoned.
That's right. Exactly. And then the video was supplied to news organizations, where he was seen in a rather shifty and jumpy manner, making incriminating statements of one kind or the other, after that, Pakistan said, we have clinching evidence, we are going to give a dossier, we are going to raise this with the Indians. Often we had Pakistani officials say that we will make a big disclosure very soon about details of what Jadhav has been doing. None of that happened. Fast forward to about a month or two ago, when there was a report in the Pakistani press where Sartaj Aziz, who is the diplomatic foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, said that or was quoted as saying that we don't really have enough evidence to proceed against Kulbhushan Jadhav. And now you have this announcement of a death sentence. So I would say it's rather curious, the timing of this. I would say that it's mysterious as to the kind of proceedings that they've launched against him. And the grand claims that were made through that confessional video and by Pakistani officials subsequent to that, that here is a man who acted on behalf of RAW, who was engaged in acts of terror in Pakistan. They claimed that he had killed dozens of people in various acts of terror. No details have been given of that so far. So we don't know any concrete act of terror which they have tried to pin to him or to RNAW, on whose behalf they claim he was acting. And curiously, even the announcement by ISPR talks about being convicted under the Army Act and OSA, but doesn't mention the anti-terrorism legislation of Pakistan or other statutes under which you would try somebody accused of sabotage and terrorism and killing civilians, etc. So I think that there's more to this than meets the eye, clearly. But the timing itself, I would say, is a little odd. It's a little curious, and perhaps it's linked to what we have been writing about in The Wire, which is the disappearance, quote unquote, of a Pakistani officer in Nepal. There's much speculation in Pakistan as well as to perhaps the two being connected. And I think as the days and weeks go by, we will probably learn more.
The disappearance that you're talking about is basically about this retired Lieutenant Colonel Muhammad Habib, who basically he had last spoken to his wife on I think April 6th, and he was basically had gone to Lumbini and he basically disappeared from there. And he gone there apparently for a job offer, and an FIR has been lodged, and the Pakistan Foreign Office basically made it announced that there's a missing army officer on April 8th, that is this Saturday. So it's just 2 days after that it's actually the announcement that this has happened. So there could be, I mean, it's a speculative question, but there could be a link between
I would say it's, you know, certainly the Pakistani media is speculating, and I think the timing is curious, to say the least, that after Sartaj Aziz in a way went on the record with the media, or at least media quoted him in Pakistan. I think maybe he told the committee of Pakistani parliament that there's not much evidence against Kulbhushan Jadhav. To go from there to the sudden announcement of a death sentence, no mention given of when this trial took place, when the FCGM took place. You know, it's odd. I should add, for the benefit of our viewers, that the official story that Pakistan put out was that Kulbhushan Jadhav was arrested inside Pakistani territory. Today's press release adds one detail, that this was part of a counterintelligence operation by Pakistan launched from Mashkhel in Balochistan, which is in a way, it's about a 3-hour drive. 3 hours separates Mashkhel from Sarawan, which is the place in Sistan, Balochistan on the Iranian side that Kulbhushan Jadhav had identified in his so-called confessional video as the base or the place where he was operating from. So we still don't know under what circumstances he was arrested. There is speculation, and certainly the government of India, I believe, has said this last year, that Jadhav may have been abducted from the Iranian side and brought across into Pakistan to show this as an arrest made on the Pakistani side. And I have to say that one of the claims that the Pakistanis made, which was that they recovered an Indian passport from Kulbhushan Jadhav in the name of Patel, Hussain Mubarak Patel, presumably a false passport. But the curious thing about this is that if indeed the Pakistani story is true, and that he worked for RAW or some Indian intelligence agency and was involved in contacts with Balochi separatists, as the allegations in Pakistan go, why would you carry an Indian passport for what was clearly a clandestine mission, right? So if you are going across the border in an illegal manner, why would you carry an Indian passport? And even if you felt the need to carry documentation of one kind or the other, if you are working for a large intelligence agency, as the Pakistanis claim he is, then accessing or getting a passport of a third country, an Afghan passport or a Nepali passport or even a Pakistani passport, isn't all that difficult, right? So if the operation required somebody to have a fake passport with them, although I really find it hard to understand why, you know, there's no part of tradecraft. And I put this question, you know, in a couple of track 2 meetings where we've been face to face with former Pakistani intelligence officials, and they've always they always told the Indian side, when we asked about, when we mentioned ISI involvement or support to terror groups in Kashmir, they will say, no, but we have Jadhav. And when we would ask them, look, how come he was caught with this Indian passport inside Pakistan? And, you know, please explain it to us from the point of view of tradecraft, from espionage practice. They're not able to come up with an answer. And so I think that this is one of the several unanswered questions that this case involves. And if indeed he was abducted from the Iranian side, as the government of India claims, then it's possible that the disappearance of this Pakistani officer from Lumbini, which they you know, may be part of a more complicated dance, in which in which the announcement of the death sentence is part of this game, where the two sides are essentially attempting to act against each other. I don't know, this is speculation. But I would say that based on just circumstantial evidence, the presence of this fake passport, I for one find it very hard to imagine why a RAW agent would cross the Iran-Pakistan border illegally and carry a document that would identify him as an Indian.
But so you basically don't expect the sentence to be carried out?
You know, it's hard to say. I mean, I think that in diplomatic in the very long, complicated relations that India and Pakistan have had, executing a spy in this way, or an alleged spy, or a man you've convicted of espionage, would be a huge escalation, particularly at a time when relations are already rock bottom. So I would expect that this is one stage in what is likely to be a fairly complicated song and dance that Pakistan and eventually India will have to engage with, join in. It's, generally speaking, even at the height of the Cold War, you'd be hard pressed to come across examples of foreign nationals. If a domestic national, if the Soviets arrested a Russian spy who was acting, a Russian national acting on behalf of the CIA, chances are that the KGB would have made pretty short shrift of him. But most cases during the Cold War of people accused of espionage who were nationals of the other side tended to get resolved through exchanges of one kind or the other. So I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that this announcement is part of some kind of a complex bargaining strategy that Pakistan will engage in. It of course ups the ante. It creates uncertainty about what will happen next in terms of how India will respond. I should remind our viewers that from day one India has been demanding consular access to Pakistan, and this is in fact a requirement under international law, under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which is the primary international law document from 1963, which governs the conduct of diplomatic relations between countries. A consular official posted in another country, so that would mean the Indian ambassador or any Indian diplomatic official in Pakistan, would have the right to access to meet with Indian nationals who are in custody or facing trial, or even those who have been convicted. Pakistan has refused to give India access, and I think this is a breach of international law, because there is no exception in the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations that allows a country to say we will not give you access to a man accused of espionage. So the Vienna Convention does not have a list of crimes which allow for consular access and those that don't. So the presumption has to be that if an Indian national was under arrest and under trial and now convicted or sentenced, the Pakistanis must give Indian diplomatic officials consular access to him. And this is important for India to have that access, and I guess it's important, or it's not hard to understand why Pakistan will not give access, because the first thing that will emerge were Indian officials to have access to Mr. Jadhav is that this confessional video which they put out, which was heavily edited, and which actually had Jadhav making various incriminating statements, but also I would say contradictory statements. The truth of that would come out if an Indian diplomat were to actually be able to meet him, and if Jadhav were to have some sense that contact has been established with the Indian side. It's quite possible that he would then speak freely. As long as somebody is under Pakistani custody, you have to presume that he's speaking under duress. And the very fact that you would record a video and put it out and then subject it to heavy editing, and despite that you have Jadhav saying very improbable things, and I can give examples of that in that video. I think that this itself puts a huge question mark about the veracity of Pakistan's claims. Pakistan still has the right, I suppose, in the court of world opinion, to make a case, but the way it has gone about it, pokes serious holes in its own claims, and I think that this is something that not just India but the international community as a whole needs to take up. So,
as you mentioned, that Pakistan has been using the Kulbhushan Jadhav case internationally. I mean, they have sent UN dossiers to the UN Secretary General famously, where apparently Maliha Lodi only handed it over to not even the UN Secretary General, it was basically aide of the UN Secretary General. Yeah. So they have not exactly been able to use Jadhav in any material sense, right? It hasn't really impacted their case internationally.
Yeah. I mean, the reason for that is quite simple, right? That basic elements of transparency and basic elements of rationality are not present in this case. I mean, if you compare, I mean, Pakistan and Pakistani interlocutors on track 2, for example, often try to use Jadhav to establish an equivalence between what Pakistan has been credibly accused of doing, which is using the ISI to train and equip and send terrorists from the Lashkar-e-Taiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed or other groups across the line of control, or even to a place like Bombay. Even if the ISI is not directly involved, but retired ISI officials up, and the Pakistani investigation itself uncovered the nexus that existed between some of these retired people and the operatives of the LET. So there's a whole welter of evidence that the world at large has, and the world at large has accessed. In this case, Pakistan has yet to provide to the UN or to any international partner the kind of evidence that it says it has. And I think for that reason, the noise it has made over the Jadhav case for the past year hasn't generated the kind of traction that they'd hoped it would. And I think it actually strengthens India's case for the world to lean on Pakistan to give access to Jadhav, so that India can actually ascertain the state and condition of Jadhav, his physical well-being, his mental well-being, and to get to the bottom of this case.
In fact, I was listening to some of the Pakistani TV channels right now after the announcement, and I heard one of the analysts say basically that what they have done to Jadhav is exactly what India has done to Ajmal Kasab, which I found a very strange way of basically acknowledging that Ajmal Kasab perhaps was an agent of the Pakistani agent, and that was a strange analogy, and that's basically what you were saying. That
I mean, the equivalence is nutty. It's idiotic, in the sense that Kasab, even even the Indians have not alleged, right, that Kasab is an operative of any Pakistani agency. But Kasab, in his confessional statement, and he had a trial. The media were present there. Consular, I believe, maybe Pakistan was offered consular access, but they didn't accept it. Right. So they never owned him up as a Pakistani national. So the two cases really can't be compared. I would say that what gives Pakistan a little bit of propaganda edge over here, or propaganda, what gives the Pakistani side propaganda points, is that the Indian, the Bombay police was very lax and slipshod in allowing a recording that it had made of Kasab in his hospital bed, allowing that to be I think it was played on a British TV channel, which I find astonishing that somebody in the Bombay police side either made a quick buck or thought there was some PR to be gained by releasing this information, which in a way then allows Pakistan to establish a kind of false equivalence between these two video recordings. But other than that, there is no similarity whatsoever, and the world at large has seen and provided India, I mean the US, the UK, and ultimately Pakistan itself, provided evidence to show the connection between the attackers of Bombay and their handlers and organizers in Karachi and other places in Pakistan. So I think that here essentially India needs to up the ante in terms of repeating its demand for access, consular access. We carried an analysis in The Wire last year by a legal expert on the international law position on in such cases where somebody is accused of espionage, and what our analyst argued was that India may even have grounds to go to the International Court of Justice to demand that Pakistan grant consular access to Jadhav. There was a case that the ICJ adjudicated after after Iranian students stormed the US embassy in 1980 and held a number of US diplomats hostage. And Iran took the view then that these aren't diplomats, these are spies. And because they're spies, you cannot have access to them. And the ICJ essentially ruled against Iran on this point. So I think that there are grounds for India to say that the right of consular access is a customary norm of international law. Pakistan has to follow it. And that the world at large, really needs to, demand that Pakistan, stand by its obligations. This is quite apart from the wider obligations of, the promise that Musharraf made in January 2004, not to allow Pakistani territory or soil that it controls to be used for acts of terror against India. The Pakistani side has not abided by that commitment. So I think that, you know, these are all the questions that this case raises. But I want to come back to something I said earlier, which is and also to add to anybody watching us on Facebook, that feel free to pose questions if you like. You can add your questions to our Facebook page, and we will try to take them up within the constraints of time. But one of the curious aspects of the Jadhav case, Devirupa, is the confession that Jadhav purportedly made, right? Where, as I said earlier, he made certain contradictory and odd statements. Like he said that I was in the Navy and then I joined RAW, right. Which is very unusual. We know that even the Indian intelligence agencies are riven with all kinds of bureaucratic obstacles and so on, and so it's so that itself is odd for somebody to be in the Navy and in RAW at the same time. And of course, he said that I conducted operations working for RAW. I first conducted operations within the country. That is also something a bit strange, because RAW generally is tasked with external intelligence. So I think that, you know, there were enough telltale signs in what Jadhav said, which suggests that either he was making up things as he was going along, or you know, leaving red herrings in what might otherwise appear to the Pakistani side to be a convincing confession, because he was, after all, in their custody, to allow you know, Pakistan, you know, to allow the world at large to get a sense that this confession is being made under duress. So I think that there's no reason why, if today the ISPR press release says that Jadhav made a confession before the judge, why this should be taken at face value. And I think until India has access and is able to understand the circumstances under which he's been held, has he been subjected to torture or duress of one kind or the other, it will be very, very hard to accept what Pakistan has said in its press release today.
How do you think that India has so far not responded to give any response? Obviously, it was just 1 hour ago. But how do you expect India to draft its reply to this move from the Pakistani side? Do you expect it to be as much as basically the Pakistani High Commissioner being summoned by the Foreign Secretary? Do you think it will be taken up that level?
You know, this is the case of an Indian national, a former Navy officer, who India says was abducted from Iran. But even if we discount that element, right? The fact that he has not been given access to Indian officials despite several démarches having been made, you know, I think is something that India is bound to raise with the Pakistani side. So I would expect a strong protest from India, because here is a man whom the government has been, you know, persistently demanding consular access to. Pakistanis have refused that. Here is a man who was initially accused of all kinds of crimes. They said he was responsible. In fact, I believe there were stories planted in the Pakistani media that tried to connect him to the massacre of Aga Khanis in Karachi. There was the Ismailis. There was a horrible massacre on a bus, and there was some attempt made to connect him to Balochi insurgents who were then accused of carrying out that atrocity. In the event, the Pakistanis have given no evidence whatsoever of Kulbhushan Jadhav's involvement in any act of terror. As I said earlier, the ISPR press release itself talks only of his being tried under the Army Act and under Official Secrets Act. And I read Section 3 of the OSA Pakistan, which is similar to the Indian one, which essentially applies to cases of espionage. And so if you say that he's a spy and you're trying him under OSA, then at the very least, this makes it very clear that you don't have evidence to suggest that he was connected to any acts of terrorism. So the Pakistani side, in a way, has, through this press release, taken away a major aspect of its own propaganda campaign that they launched in March and April last year, right? Where the suggestion was made that Jadhav was part of a raw plot to plant bombs in Pakistan, to stage acts of terror in Pakistan, and that the attempt was made to draw an equivalence between these incidents and the incidents that Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed and others have been engaging in on the Indian side. So the very fact that after 1 year, you have convicted him of espionage, but you've not been able to pin any act of terror on him, at least takes away that part of what Pakistan was saying.
I'm a little surprised that they haven't mentioned terrorism, because they can easily, I mean, if we are saying that most of the crimes that he has been accused of against the Baluchis and everybody and all the Ismaili bomb blast have been basically concocted, then why couldn't they do the same during the trial? Because we don't know what exactly happened in the trial.
I think that, you know, I can only hazard a guess, quite frankly, but most major acts of terror in Pakistan have been the handiwork of the TTP, have been the handiwork of now ISIS increasingly, have been the handiwork of remnants of the Al-Qaeda or Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Sipahi Sahaba outfits that have all, you know, morphed into different kinds of groups. And in pretty much all these cases, including the Karachi bus attack on the Ismailis, by the way, the Pakistani police and the Pakistani military and the FIA, the Federal Investigations Agency, have themselves been arresting people and charging them, and you know, so it's not as if there's any major terrorist attack which has already not been, you know, ascribed to some known terrorist group that is operating within Pakistan. So I think when it came to actually retrofitting Jadhav, you know, Jadhav's involvement to some of these crimes, you either then have to come up with a very fantastic plot that the Sipahi Sahaba is being run by India, or the TTP is being run by India, which from time to time Pakistanis suggest, but never very credibly. The world laughs at these suggestions, right? Some people try to say even the Army Public School massacre in Peshawar was the handiwork of Indians, but nobody believes these, and these are not credible claims. So perhaps the Pakistani side figured that, well, rather than trying to pin a specific crime on Jadhav, which may unravel later, it's better to keep it vague, limited to espionage. I don't know. But I would say that this press release itself in many ways undermines a primary claim that Pakistan was making for the past year, that they have clinching proof of Indian involvement in acts of terror and sabotage inside Pakistan. If they do, it certainly is not manifest in what they have said today. And I think that there's no reason to, and perhaps that's what Sartaj Aziz meant when he was quoted telling parliamentarians that we don't have proof. I think his quote was that we don't have enough proof to hang him.
That's right.
Now, under the amended OSA in Pakistan, the original OSA in 1923, the British era OSA, I don't think had the death sentence for espionage. I think the maximum penalty was 14 years. But at some stage this was amended in Pakistan. Maybe the Indians have a similar amendment, I don't know. I haven't studied the Indian Act closely. But the Pakistani OSA prescribes the death penalty even for acts of espionage. And you know, maybe this is what, but in any case, a court-martial is always, you know, the details are kept under wraps, so we don't know what were the arguments made, we don't know what confession he made. In the purported confession that he made on video, he confesses to having been involved in acts of violence that took the lives of Pakistani citizens. He doesn't say civilians, he says citizens. Right. I don't know, again, what to read into that, quite frankly. But that was a statement that was made while he was in Pakistani custody and has to be discounted accordingly. So I think that until Pakistan respects its obligations under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations and gives India access to Jadhav, we are not going to be any the wiser about the circumstances of his arrest, the circumstances of his, of his so-called confession, how he's been held. You know, what we do know about Jadhav is that he took early retirement from the Indian Navy, right, and was involved in running a dhao, essentially Bombay, Chabahar. It's possible that he went to other ports in the Arabian Sea, perhaps Gwadar, perhaps Karachi, perhaps Qatar, Bahrain. We don't know. But he was based in Chabahar, and he says in his confessional video that he was, involved in something near the border. And
if you remember, Pakistan Army almost did a diplomatic disaster when I think the ISPR, the previous ISPR, Asif Bajwa, he tweeted when the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani was on a visit to Pakistan last year, that they have discussed, the issue about the Indian national spying from Iranian soil.
Yeah.
And that really offended the Iranian side.
That's
because
right.
That was basically against protocol. Why would suddenly ISPR?
That's right. That's right, exactly. And I think the Pakistani side, there was some damage control done because they were essentially putting trying to establish an equivalence between India's alleged espionage against Pakistan and the arrest of Jadhav, and that somehow this was an act against Iran as well. Exactly. And I think the Iranian side didn't appreciate this attempt being made, and the Pakistani side had to dial back a little bit on that. But I would say that, you know, this is today's the announcement of the death sentence is in a way adds a new challenge to the, you know, already strained you know, relationship between the two countries.
In fact, the relations are already strained. Does it really matter that the, I mean, is it more, this death sentence is basically more of a signal from the Pakistani side that they want to negotiate rather than basically impacting the relationship as such?
Yeah.
Because it's already in a bad state.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, is this, in other words, I mean, what you're really saying is that is this a tactical kind of a development, right, which is perhaps linked to the disappearance of this Pakistani officer, or perhaps to some other tactical objective of the Pakistani military, or is it part of a wider escalation of the confrontation between India and Pakistan? I don't know, quite frankly. I would imagine that the reason why we haven't heard from the Indian side yet is that they are probably trying to also assess what this means. They would have their own sources, the Indian side, in judging when, if at all, this field marshal, the field general court martial took place, and you know, whether this is really a development of the last few days or is in some way linked to Pakistani suspicions about its officer having gone missing in Nepal. These are all assessments that Delhi will have to make. I would imagine that the MEA, the intelligence agencies, the NSA would be involved in trying to piece together all that they know about this particular this new development, and I think it will be several hours before you get a considered response from India, because I think all of these different elements would have to be weighed in by Indian policymakers before they decide on the next step.
Do you think that anyway, if there's a negotiation, will it ever come out in the public? Because then we'll have to acknowledge that there has been abduction of that former Pakistani soldier from the Nepali side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, as long as we're speculating, let me go the whole hog. Yeah. There's no reason why India should prima facie accept the Pakistani view that he has disappeared or that he has been abducted. They haven't said that, right? So it's quite possible that the Indian government may announce that this gentleman was caught at Meerut or some other cantonment, or in some other area, or in Kashmir. Don't forget that there was a gap of 3 weeks between when Pakistan announced the arrest of Jadhav, right? March 26th.
March 26th and March 3rd.
March 3rd is when, as per his confessional video, and I think a statement of the Baloch Interior Minister, right? So we know from the Baloch Interior Minister's statement and from Jadhav's own thing that he was arrested a few weeks ago in a video recorded around the 26th or 27th, that there was a gap of 3 weeks, right? So just as there was a gap of 3 weeks between his disappearance, as it were, and the announcement of his arrest, you could very well have something similar in this case. So I would say that you know, I wouldn't underestimate the capacity of the Indian and Pakistani side to engage in some kind of a negotiation on this. We are perhaps, I mean, we're really going ahead of ourselves because we don't know
if actually there's any link.
Exactly. A, if there's any link. B, if this gentleman has even disappeared or not.
And he may suddenly
Exactly. And so I think that, but I wouldn't, you know, these kinds of things are quite common in, you know, spy versus spy scenarios, right? And, you know, tit for tat kind of things, which is not to say that Jadhav was necessarily involved in anything that the Pakistanis say he was, but, you know, you have to imagine that the Indian government would not be very happy about a former naval officer being in Pakistani custody and being sentenced to death. So I think that I would expect under any and every circumstance that the government of India would go the extra mile to ensure the safe return of Kulbhushan Jadhav to India. You know, and I think that's where I think you would see the game playing out over the next few weeks and months. I think this is something where a lot may not be visible in the public domain, you will probably see a strong diplomatic protest by India and a reiteration of the demand for consular access. I don't think India has never initiated, we have never initiated a legal step at the ICJ. So I wouldn't imagine that we would raise this there. The last time we went to the ICJ was when Pakistan took for the Atlantic downing, and there we questioned the jurisdiction of the ICJ, and the ICJ finally ruled in India's favor. So India doesn't have an appetite to internationalize, quote unquote, these kinds of bilateral issues. Although I have to say that here this is clearly a violation of a customary, one of the foundational aspects of international law, which govern the way that diplomatic relations between countries are conducted. And I think if an Indian consular official is not being given access to Jadhav, this is a serious breach of the Vienna Convention, which India needs to take up in a strong way.
I think before we leave, we should take at least one question from the Facebook. I can see this question posed by Mr. Kulbhushan Jadhav. He has asked, just let me check with both the mics. He's asked, what has been the civil society's response, Indian as well as Pakistani, to the abduction of an Indian citizen by Pakistani enforcement agencies?
I presume he means that the abduction of Jadhav.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I mean, the Pakistani civil society has by and large gone along with the Pakistani claim that he was arrested inside Pakistan. So I don't think in Pakistan many people, including the media, accept the idea that he was abducted. Although I have to say, I came across a statement reported in Dawn by I think the German Consul General in Karachi, or the German ambassador, where he mentioned that abduction is a strong possibility. So I think that Pakistani civil society has not reacted, although I think in your story you mentioned Bilawal, Bilawal coming out against the death penalty, which is it's a bold stand for him to take. On the Indian side, I would say that most people are skeptical of the official Pakistani claim that he was arrested on the Pakistani side, for the simple reason that it's hard to square that claim with the second claim they make, that he had a fake Indian passport on him, right? So I find it very hard to swallow as a journalist or as an analyst who is quite prepared to be skeptical of claims that my government makes. I find it very hard to square Pakistan's claim that he was an experienced raw operative with the fact that he would commit a basic tradecraft blunder of carrying an Indian passport for a rendezvous inside Pakistan that involves an illegal crossing, right? If he was flying undercover, let's say he was visiting Karachi as part of his dhow business, right? And was maybe observing the harbour or doing various other kinds of espionage activities, quote unquote, then yeah, I mean, he could carry this fake passport. It would make sense. But if you're crossing a border illegally for a clandestine appointment, as they say, with Balochi insurgents, why would you carry?
Why would the Pakistanis say that? I mean, obviously, I'm still surprised that obviously they also are very well versed in Pakistan.
Yeah, I would imagine that if he was let's assume that this passport was acquired by Jadhav, and that as somebody who ran this dhow business, he wanted to have this kind of identity. Maybe he was an adventurer of some kind, or business. Who knows what kind of a person he was, or what but let's assume that he had this passport with him and he was abducted. So the passport goes along with him. Right. And before anybody is really able to think through, don't forget the Pakistanis, once they decided to go public, they put out the video, they put out the image of the passport,
as well as the resident.
Exactly, right? So in order to establish the veracity, as they saw it, of Jadhav being an Indian, they put this information out without necessarily thinking carefully about what its implications are. So I don't really know, but it's very hard to square that passport. Him carrying a passport for a rendezvous inside Pakistan when you're crossing the border illegally. Why would a RAW or any intelligence operative do that, right? This is not something, if an ISI agent, I don't think India has ever caught an ISI agent inside India with a Pakistani passport who's carrying ISI papers or Pakistani papers. So I think that this is really something odd, which is why I think civil society in India, including the media, has by and large been skeptical of the Pakistani claim and has tended to go along with the belief that Jadhav might indeed have been abducted.
I think the developments are still continuing. We are awaiting the response from the Ministry of External Affairs. So I think we should, right now we are basically talking only in the terms of speculation.
Yeah.
So I think we have to still see what's happening, and the rest of the day is still, I mean, hours are left. I think we'll be expecting something from the MEA quite late in the evening today.
Yeah, it's possible that MEA, which is probably, I'm sure the officials from the Pakistan division and the Foreign Secretary himself, and would be cloistered and figuring out how they want to take this forward. But if any kind of summoning is to be done or any kind of protest is to be registered, I think you would expect to hear from the MEA later today.
We should just announce here also right now that there has been a response come from the MEA.
Okay.
And like we said, that the Foreign Secretary did summon the Pakistan High Commissioner Abdul Basit and issued a demarche saying proceedings had led to the sentence of Kulbhushan Jadhav are farcical. And it also mentioned that it was significant that our High Commission was Indian High Commission in Islamabad was not even informed that Kulbhushan Jadhav was being brought to trial. And it further goes on to say that if basic norms of law and justice are not observed, government and people of India will regard it as premeditated murder, which is very strong word.
Yeah. I mean, I think that from day one, the government of India has been demanding access, and this statement underlines the fact that at no point has Pakistan fulfilled its obligations under international law to keep the Indian government and its consular officials in Islamabad apprised of the status of what is, at the end of the day, the incarceration and trial and now sentencing of an Indian national. And I have to underline for the benefit of our viewers that regardless of the gravity of the charge, there is no carve-out in the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations that would allow Pakistan to derogate from its obligation to provide consular access. So the fact that you have withheld consular access, the fact that you've put a man on trial without even informing the government of India that you're doing so, without giving the government of India any possibility to assist Jadhav in his defense against the charges that were laid against him. I think all of this underlines the fact that this process is, as the MEA says, farcical, and this is a strong statement by the MEA. The MEA obviously cannot accept this announcement by the Pakistani side, and I think this is the first in probably what is likely to be a series of responses by the Indian side, and everything will depend on how far the Pakistani government intends to take this process, of imposing the death sentence on Jadhav.
I think one area that we haven't looked so far is basically the domestic political situation right now in Pakistan, and does it have any bearing on this move? Yeah,
I mean, see, the domestic political situation, I mean, there's two or three things happening there, right? We were talking earlier about the Panama Papers and the vulnerability of Nawaz Sharif, but this announcement has, the announcement has come from the ISPR, right? It hasn't come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it has all the hallmarks of the Pakistani establishment putting a statement out. So is this a diversion from Panama Papers by the political side of the establishment? I don't think so. I think that this is a move by the Pakistani military. This is a move, and it comes at a time when at least a number of Pakistani analysts were suggesting that you had a fairly good equation between the civilian government and the new army chief. There was, in fact, a number of Pakistani interlocutors were saying that the new army chief was not one to want to meddle in civilian affairs, and he wanted essentially to give the civilian government room to maneuver. But I think that this particular upping of the ante suggests that reading might not be correct, that this is essentially a step that the Pakistani military has taken, which is going to complicate India-Pakistan relations. It's a different matter that nothing much was happening on that front anyway. Relations, as you've said, are at pretty much rock bottom. But if the military, so is this a tactical response to the development that we mentioned earlier in Lumbini, or does this represent a fresh attempt by the Pakistani military to push relations even further southward? I don't know, but I think it's not helpful. I think that the Pakistani military has to recognize that its announcement and the way it's conducted this entire court-martial has no credibility whatsoever. Not in India, of course, but more importantly, in the eyes of the international community at large, based on the information that Pakistan has put out so far and based on its press release today, I don't think any reasonable analyst or any government around the world will regard these proceedings as being credible in any way.
I think morning has begun. I think it's morning now in Washington, so perhaps they would have woken up to this news there. So how do you expect the Trump administration to react to this?
Yeah, the Trump administration already put a wrong foot forward when Nikki Haley made that comment about perhaps getting involved. The government of India has repeatedly said, and I'm repeating it here not because it's an Indian position or there's some theology, it's a theological position. The fact is that India-Pakistan relations are such that there is no role for an outside power to play here. The contours are very clearly marked. The government of India wants the Pakistani side to establish its bona fides as far as acting against terror groups are concerned. There are a number of metrics that have emerged over the past few years. For example, action against the perpetrators of the Bombay attacks, action against the Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. So these are metrics that the Pakistani side can quite easily deal with. And were it to do so, the stalemated India-Pakistan relationship, right? The comprehensive bilateral dialogue that was announced by Sushma Swaraj and Sartaj Aziz back in 2015 December, but which never started. It's possible that then that show can get on the road. So it's not as if there is any suggestion that the US could make in its capacity as a broker, or Russia or China or any other country that can help as long as Pakistan is unwilling to deliver on some of these issues, right? So the roadmap is clear, and when India has repeatedly said this, and we can have a debate in this country as we do about the merits of holding every aspect of bilateral relations hostage to Pakistani action on terror. There is a debate in this country as to whether, but this is a debate that is happening within the contours that are well defined by the government, right? So it's very hard to imagine what role Trump or Nikki Haley or Rex Tillerson can play in this kind of a situation. And so I would imagine that the best that the Trump administration can do once it decides what South Asian policy it wants to have would be to counsel Pakistan to not escalate matters, to abide by its international legal obligations, which is to provide access, consular access to Jadhav. And now that it's kind of gone the whole hog and even held a trial without any kind of consular access or any Indian assistance to its national, to actually cancel this court-martial verdict, and if it insists, to have fresh proceedings, but this time proceedings that are done as per the letter and spirit of international law, where Government of India representatives have access to Jadhav, can provide him legal assistance, and the evidence such as Pakistan claims it has can be evaluated by in a court of law where people can observe and the media can see, and more importantly, Indian diplomatic representatives can provide every assistance to one of their nationals. Pakistan has never ever wanted to step forward whenever a Pakistani national has been caught on the Indian side, either engaging in an act of terror or an act of espionage, right? Here you have a case where the government of India says Jadhav is an Indian national. We want access to him. You may accuse him of espionage. We are not disowning him. We don't say he's a spy. He was a retired naval officer, but we want access to him, because until we have access to him, we cannot really be in a position to say under what circumstances was he arrested, under what circumstances have you held him prisoner, what kind of duress or torture have you subjected him to. We need that access. So I think the very fact that the MEA and the Indian High Commission in Islamabad have persisted in their demand to have access to Jadhav itself speaks volumes about India's willingness to play by the rules of international law. I think it's high time that Pakistan after today's grandstanding, introspects, takes a step back, and takes a decision then that as a country that wants to be part of the international system, you have to play by the rules. And there are rules which govern how you deal with foreign citizens who are captives, even those who are accused of espionage. And I think it's essential that Pakistan play by those rules.
With that note, thank you for watching the Wire's Facebook Live. Please join us the next time. Thank you.